Have you ever stood in the doorway of your own home and felt like a stranger? That's what happened to me one summer afternoon. My name is Barbara Mitchell, I'm 65 years old, and last month, my son-in-law screamed at me to leave my own beach house. He looked me straight in the eye, this man I once called family, and shouted, "Why is this parasite here? Get out." The room fell silent, everyone staring. My daughter said nothing. My hands trembled, but I smiled. "Sure," I told him quietly, "I'm leaving." What he didn't know was that I wasn't walking away defeated. That night, everything changed. Before I tell you how that night unfolded, please take a second to like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Because this story, my story, is about what happens when kindness is mistaken for weakness. When you lose the person who made every day feel safe, the world changes in ways no one warns you about. For 42 years, my husband Robert and I built a life together, quiet mornings with coffee, laughter echoing through our kitchen, and weekends at our beach house in Malibu. That house wasn't just property, it was a promise. Robert's dream. Our sanctuary. After he passed away a year and a half ago, I kept telling myself the beach house would be where I'd heal. A place to breathe again. But grief is heavy, and even paradise can feel empty when you're alone. Still, last June, I decided to drive down for the weekend. 2 hours on the highway, my arthritic hands aching on the wheel, the sun setting over the coast. I thought I'd arrive at peace, to Robert's memory carried on the waves. Instead, I pulled into the driveway and felt something tighten in my chest. There were cars everywhere. Laughter. Music. Voices I didn't recognize. That's when I knew something was terribly wrong. You know that uneasy feeling when you sense you're walking into a place that should bring comfort but instead feels unfamiliar? That's exactly how it was for me that Friday evening. The moment I parked, I noticed things that didn't belong: Derek's black BMW, a silver Lexus I didn't recognize, and a red pickup truck sitting right on the grass Robert used to trim with such care. Every light in the house was on, and the sound of laughter mixed with loud music drifted through the open windows. I hadn't told anyone I was coming. It was supposed to be a quiet weekend alone, just me and the memories of Robert. But from the looks of it, I was the intruder in my own home. For a moment, I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe Rachel had planned a surprise visit. I wanted to believe that, but deep down, I already knew this wasn't something innocent. I stepped out of the car and walked toward the front door, my heart pounding. I could hear Derek's voice from inside, loud, commanding, like he was hosting some grand event. The laughter grew louder as I reached for the handle and opened the door. The smell hit me first, beer and cigarette smoke. No one in my family smoked. Robert never allowed it in the house because of my asthma. My living room was filled with strangers. A couple I didn't know sat on my white couch with their shoes on, tracking sand across the floor. Someone had set up a speaker in the corner, and empty bottles cluttered the coffee table. And then I saw him, Derek, my son-in-law. He stood in the middle of it all, laughing like he owned the place. My daughter Rachel was near the kitchen, pale and quiet, her eyes wide when she saw me. "Mom? What are you doing here?" she stammered. Before I could answer, Derek turned, and the smile vanished from his face. He looked at me like I'd ruined his evening. "What the hell are you doing here, Barbara?" I froze. His words sliced through me. "This is my house," I said softly. "I came for the weekend." He laughed. "Your house? You mean our house? You weren't invited. So why don't you leave before you embarrass yourself?" That's when I realized I wasn't welcome in my own home. Standing there in that crowded living room, I could feel months of hurt gathering inside me like a storm I'd tried too long to ignore. Derek's shouting was only the final strike. The cracks had started forming long before that night. After Robert passed, I thought my family would draw closer. Rachel promised to check on me every week, and Derek even sent flowers to the funeral. I believed we were united in grief. But little by little, things changed. The phone calls stopped coming. Rachel said they were busy with work, with friends, with life. I tried not to take it personally. When you've lost your partner of 42 years, you cling to the small moments that still make you feel needed. I thought visiting them would help. That first Thanksgiving without Robert, I arrived with a warm pumpkin pie and trembling hands. Derek opened the door and didn't even greet me with a hug. He pointed toward the kitchen, told me to set the pie down, then turned back to the football game. Rachel caught my eyes, whispered an apology, and hurried off. I told myself it didn't matter. Maybe he was tired. Maybe I was being too sensitive. But it kept happening. In December, I drove to the beach house hoping to sit on the deck where Robert and I used to drink coffee at sunrise. My key no longer worked. The locks had been changed. I stood there on the porch, holding that useless piece of metal, wondering if grief was making me forgetful. When I called Rachel, she sounded flustered. "Oh, Derek changed them last month," she said quickly. "He was worried about the old locks rusting from the sea air. We'll bring you the new keys soon." Weeks passed before she handed them over. I noticed she didn't invite me in when I stopped by their apartment. She looked pale, tired, almost scared. I wanted to ask what was wrong, but she closed the door so quickly that the words never left my mouth. January arrived, my first birthday without Robert. I planned to spend it at the beach house surrounded by memories of him. Before I could even pack, Rachel called again. "Mom, I'm so sorry," she said, "but Derek's family already booked the house for that weekend. It's his parents' anniversary." I remember the sting of hearing that. My birthday was replaced by an anniversary party for people who treated me like a distant relative. I said, "It's my house, Rachel. My birthday." She promised to celebrate with me the following weekend. That celebration never came. She canceled, said Derek had the flu. Month after month, new excuses appeared. The beach house was always unavailable. There was always a retreat, a family gathering, a friend who needed it more than I did. Each time I stayed silent, convincing myself they meant no harm. I didn't want conflict. I didn't want to be the lonely widow who made trouble for her daughter. But deep down, I felt it, the slow shifting of ownership, the quiet rewriting of what belonged to whom. Derek spoke about the property as if it were his project. "We've been handling the maintenance," he told me once over dinner, as though I should be grateful. He started making decisions without asking. When I gently protested, Rachel's voice always came, soft and tired, "Mom, please, just let him handle it. He knows what he's doing." Every time she said that, I felt Robert's absence like a hole in my chest. He'd been the one who made sure I was never dismissed, never ignored. Now, without him, I was being managed like a guest in my own life. I tried to focus on small joys, the garden in Pasadena, the morning walks by the lake, but the emptiness grew heavier. Sometimes I'd sit by the window and look at Robert's photo, whispering that I was doing my best to keep our world together. He always believed people revealed their true character when they thought no one was watching. Derek was revealing his, one small act at a time. By May, even simple things became complicated. I wanted to take the grandchildren to the beach house for a weekend, just the three of us. Rachel hesitated, then said Derek's brother was using it for a bachelor party. A bachelor party, in the same house where Robert and I had celebrated every wedding anniversary. I hung up the phone, pressed my hand to my chest, and sat in silence for a long time. The realization came slowly but clearly, they weren't just borrowing the house. They were keeping me away. Whether Rachel understood it or not, Derek had found a way to erase me from a place that carried Robert's spirit. Still, I said nothing. We're taught to be patient, to put family first, to trust that love will correct itself. I told myself Rachel was caught between loyalty and fear, that she'd come around. But each excuse, each locked door, each unreturned call chipped away at that hope. So when I pulled into the driveway that June afternoon and saw cars scattered across the lawn, music shaking the windows, and voices laughing as if they owned the world, the truth settled in my chest. They had taken over completely. That was supposed to be my safe place, the the one corner of the earth where I still felt Robert beside me. And yet, as I stood on that porch listening to strangers celebrate inside, I realized I had allowed them to treat my silence as permission. Not anymore. The moment I stepped inside, every sound in the house seemed to stop for a heartbeat. Music still pulsed faintly from the speaker, but the laughter quieted as faces turned toward me. Strangers filled every corner of the room, people I'd never met lounging on my couch, sipping drinks as though they owned the place. Derek stood near the dining table, one hand around a beer, his posture relaxed and confident. Rachel froze in the kitchen doorway, eyes wide, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Mom? You're here?" Before I could answer, Derek's tone cut through the air. "What are you doing here, Barbara?" I looked at him, searching for the polite son-in-law I once knew, but the man in front of me wasn't that person. "This is my house," I said quietly. "I came for the weekend." He gave a short laugh, the kind that carries arrogance instead of humor. "Your house? Rachel, you didn't tell her?" Rachel's lips parted, but no words came. She turned her gaze toward the floor, and that silence hurt more than any insult could have. "What is it I should know?" I asked. Derek stepped closer. "Rachel and I have been managing this property for months. We handle everything, bills, repairs, taxes. You can't just show up without notice." "Managing?" I repeated. "It's my home, Derek." He shrugged. "You haven't exactly been around. Someone had to take responsibility. Do you even realize how much this place costs to keep up? The property taxes alone would bury you. Rachel and I have been carrying that burden while you sit in Pasadena doing nothing." I felt my chest tighten. "That's not true." Robert made sure. "Robert's gone," Derek interrupted. "And you're not exactly in a position to maintain a coastal property. Rachel and I stepped in so it wouldn't fall apart. You should be thanking us." Every eye in the room was on me. Some faces looked uncomfortable, others entertained. The shame was suffocating. I turned toward my daughter, hoping she would speak, defend me, say anything that showed she still remembered who I was. But Rachel's eyes glistened with tears she refused to let fall. "Rachel," I whispered, "is this what you want? For me to ask permission to stay in my own home?" Her voice cracked. "Mom, please, not now." Derek smirked. "You heard her. Not now. We're having a family weekend. You weren't invited." "Invited?" The word lodged in my throat. "This is my home. I don't need an invitation." He set his drink down and crossed his arms. "Let's be honest, Barbara. This place isn't really yours anymore. You couldn't afford it without us. You're lucky we've kept it in shape." Something inside me went still. "Are you saying you've been paying for the property?" "Exactly," he said. "Everything. While you sit on that pension, we've been covering the real expenses. So maybe you should show a little gratitude instead of barging in unannounced." The guests shifted uncomfortably, but Derek didn't seem to notice. He was enjoying the power of the moment, the way humiliation could be disguised as responsibility. "You think I'm ungrateful?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I think," he said slowly, "you've been living off everyone else long enough. You show up here expecting us to host you, feed you, entertain you. You've become a problem, Barbara." I felt the room tilt slightly, a wave of dizziness washing over me. "A problem?" His smile turned cruel. "Why is this parasite here?" The word struck like a slap. "Get the hell out." The room fell silent. Someone's glass slipped and shattered against the floor. I could hear the ocean outside through the open patio doors, steady and uncaring, while my world crumbled in front of strangers. Rachel covered her face with her hands, shaking her head, but still said nothing. I wanted to scream, to demand that she stop him, but instead, I straightened my shoulders. My heart ached, but my pride wouldn't let me beg for respect in a house my husband and I had built with decades of work and love. I looked around that living room, the photographs on the wall, the table Robert made himself, the rug we picked out on our anniversary trip, and I realized these people had no connection to any of it. They were guests in my life pretending to be owners. So I smiled. Not out of joy, but out of a kind of clarity that comes when pain burns away fear. "All right," I said. "If that's how you feel, I'll go." Derek blinked, surprised. "Good. I'm glad we understand each other." I turned toward Rachel. "Take care of yourself," I said softly. Her tears finally fell, but she didn't move to stop me. I walked out to the driveway with my heart hammering in my chest. My hands shook as I started the car, and before I knew it, I was parked at the end of the street, gasping for air. The humiliation settled like a weight in my stomach. Every sacrifice, every compromise, every moment I stayed quiet for peace had led to this. I pressed my hands against the steering wheel and cried until my vision blurred. I thought of Robert, of how he'd always protected me from cruelty like this. He would never have believed the man who married our daughter could speak to me that way. But as the tears faded, something else took their place, a sharp, calm resolve. Robert had told me before he died, "Don't let anyone take advantage of you." I'd promised him I wouldn't. Sitting there under the fading evening light, I knew I had broken that promise far too long. I wiped my face, took a deep breath, and reached for my phone. It was time to stop crying and start remembering who I was. The farther I drove from the house, the harder it became to see through my tears. I pulled over near the cliffs, staring at the ocean stretching endlessly below, the waves breaking in steady rhythm. I'd never felt so humiliated. I kept hearing Derek's voice, loud and cruel, echoing in my mind. Parasite. The word replayed again and again until anger began to replace sorrow. For the first time in months, my thoughts turned sharp. I remembered Robert's last words to me in the hospital, his voice weak but steady. "Barbara, I've made sure you're safe. Everything is in your name. Promise me you won't let anyone take that from you." At the time, I'd brushed it aside, too consumed by fear of losing him. Now, sitting there in the dark, I finally understood what he'd meant. I reached for my phone and scrolled through the contacts until I found one name, Richard Pemberton, our family attorney for more than 30 years. He was more than a lawyer, he'd been our friend. He had known Robert before I did. My fingers trembled as I pressed call. He answered on the second ring, his tone calm and familiar. "Barbara, it's been too long. How are you holding up?" I swallowed hard. "Richard, I'm sorry to call so late, but something's happened. It's about the Malibu house." He listened as I told him everything, Derek's outburst, the months of being pushed away, the lies about paying for maintenance. My voice broke more than once, but I forced myself to finish. When I was done, there was silence on the line, the kind that carried weight. "Barbara," he said at last, "do you remember what Robert and I set up after his diagnosis?" "I remember signing papers, a lot of them," I admitted. He said it was for my protection. "That's right," Richard replied. "The beach house isn't just in your name, it's held in an irrevocable trust with you as the only beneficiary and trustee. Rachel only inherits after your death. Until then, you have complete control. No one else, not Rachel, not Derek, has any legal right to manage or claim ownership of that property." His words stunned me. "But Derek said they'd been covering all the bills, the taxes, the maintenance." "That's not possible," Richard said firmly. "All expenses for the house are paid automatically from the trust fund Robert created. I manage that account personally. Every tax payment, every repair cost, all handled directly through the trust. No one has paid a dime except Robert's estate." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "So Derek's been lying?" "It seems he's been pretending to cover costs that were already paid," Richard said. "If he's been collecting money from Rachel under that claim, we're looking at fraud. And what he did tonight, ordering you out of your own property, that's trespassing and intimidation." I gripped the phone tighter. "What can I do?" "Do you want him gone tonight?" he asked. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I want my home back." Then stay where you are. I'll make a few calls. I didn't know what strings he pulled, but within half an hour, a patrol car appeared beside mine. A deputy stepped out and introduced herself. She listened as I explained what had happened. Her expression hardened with every detail. "So your son-in-law ordered you to leave property that legally belongs to you?" she confirmed. "Yes." "And there are people there now without your permission?" "Yes," I said again. She nodded. "All right, ma'am. Follow me back. We'll handle this properly." As I drove behind the patrol car, a strange calm settled over me. For months I'd felt powerless, like grief had stolen every bit of strength I once had. But now, each mile closer to that house felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. When we arrived, another police car was waiting, its lights flashing softly against the dark sky. Richard met us there, a folder tucked under his arm. He gave me a reassuring nod. The deputy knocked on the front door, her hand firm and steady. The music inside faltered, then stopped. Derek opened the door, irritation written all over his face. "Yeah? What's this about?" he barked. The deputy's voice was calm but firm. "Mr. Saunders, we're here regarding a property matter. Mrs. Mitchell is the owner of this residence. You and your guests are occupying it without her consent." Derek blinked. "What are you talking about?" "Rachel and I manage this place." Richard stepped forward, holding out a document. "Not according to these records. The property is held in trust under Mrs. Mitchell's sole authority. You have no legal standing here." For a moment, Derek said nothing. His confidence faltered as he scanned the papers. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "Rachel, get out here." My daughter appeared, her face pale and streaked with tears. "Derek, please," she said quietly. The deputy turned to me. "Mrs. Mitchell, would you like to have these individuals removed from your property?" "Yes," I said. "All of them?" Derek's eyes widened. "You can't do that." "She can," Richard replied smoothly. And she just did. I stood behind the officers as they escorted everyone out, one by one. Derek's brother mumbled something about not knowing. His parents looked embarrassed. The friends avoided eye contact. Rachel stood in the doorway, shaking, caught between two worlds, the man she'd chosen and the mother she'd betrayed. When Derek passed me, he leaned in close, his voice low and trembling with anger. "You'll regret this." I looked at him evenly. "No, Derek. You will." As the last car left the driveway, the silence felt different. It wasn't lonely, it was powerful. For the first time in a long time, the house was mine again. Richard handed me new keys from the locksmith waiting nearby. "Fresh start," he said simply. I turned the key in my hand, feeling its cool weight. Robert had been right all along, everything he'd built was still protecting me. That night, I walked through every room, picking up empty bottles and turning off lights. It wasn't just cleaning, it was reclaiming my space. I opened the windows, let the sea air flow through, and whispered into the quiet, "Thank you, Robert." The night air was thick with salt and tension as the officers moved through the house. Every voice inside grew louder, angrier, more confused. I stood outside on the porch, the ocean murmuring behind me, the flashing lights reflecting against the glass windows. For months, that house had felt lost to me. Now, for the first time, it was standing on my side. Through the doorway, I could hear Derek's voice rising. "This is insane. You can't just throw people out like this." The deputy remained calm. "Sir, you're being removed from property you have no right to occupy. You can leave peacefully, or we can make it official." "You can't be serious." Derek snapped, his tone losing the false charm he'd always carried. "Quite serious," she replied. Rachel stood near the kitchen island, her face streaked with tears. When our eyes met, she looked down, as if ashamed to meet my gaze. I could see the battle inside her, guilt, loyalty, fear, all pulling in different directions. Derek turned toward her, his voice dripping with anger. Say something. Tell them we've been paying for this place. Rachel hesitated, then whispered, we haven't. His head snapped toward her. What? We haven't been paying for anything, she said, her voice trembling. The trust covers it all. You lied to me. He took a step closer, disbelief etched across his face. What are you talking about? You've been giving me money every month. I thought it was for property expenses, she said. You showed me receipts. Richard stepped forward, holding a folder. Those receipts were fake. Every payment for taxes, maintenance, and repairs has been processed directly from the trust. Derek, you've been collecting money from your wife under false claims. That's fraud. Derek's mouth opened, but no words came out. His bravado melted into panic. You have no proof of that. Oh, I do, Richard said. Every record is here. The bank transfers, the dates, the invoices you sent Rachel. I've already forwarded copies to the authorities. The room went silent. The guests who remained stared, uncomfortable and embarrassed. Derek's own brother muttered, You've got to be kidding me. Derek turned on him. Stay out of this. No, his brother said. I'm done covering for you. You've been bragging for months about how smart you are, how you're using family assets to back your business deals. Guess that's over now. The deputy cleared her throat. Sir, it's time to go. Derek's parents, pale and silent, were already gathering their things. His mother looked at me as she passed. I'm sorry, she whispered. We didn't know. I gave a brief nod. I wasn't ready to forgive, but I appreciated the decency of her words. One by one, the guests left, heads low, avoiding my eyes. The noise faded until only Rachel and Derek remained. Rachel finally spoke. You used me, she said quietly. You used my mother's house, her money, and me. You said we were helping her. You said she couldn't handle things alone. Derek's voice rose again, desperate now. I did it for us. For our future. I was trying to make things better. By lying to me? By stealing? It's not stealing if it's family, he shot back. Rachel shook her head, her voice breaking. That's exactly what it is. Richard turned to me. Barbara, do you want to issue a formal trespass order? It'll ensure he can't return. Yes, I said firmly. I want that in place immediately. The deputy filled out a form and handed it to me to sign. I didn't hesitate. My hand shook slightly as I wrote my name, but it wasn't from fear, it was relief. Derek laughed, though it came out hollow. You think a piece of paper will stop me? You're making a mistake, Barbara. Richard looked him straight in the eye. The only mistake made tonight was yours. You thought kindness was weakness. You were wrong. The deputy gestured toward the door. Sir, it's time. He stood there for a moment, defiance flickering in his eyes, then turned and stormed out into the night. His tires screeched against the pavement as he sped away, leaving behind the wreckage of his arrogance. Rachel stood by the window, trembling. Mom, I didn't know about the money. I swear I didn't. But you knew he was keeping me away, I said quietly. She wiped her tears, unable to meet my eyes. I know. I thought I was keeping peace. I was wrong. I'm so sorry. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence felt heavier than the shouting had been. She looked so small standing there, like the little girl who used to come running to me after a bad dream. I wanted to comfort her, but the wound was too deep, too fresh. I need time, Rachel, I said finally. You let this happen. You stood there while he humiliated me. She nodded. I understand. Richard placed a hand on my shoulder. Let's get the locks changed. You shouldn't have to spend another night in a house that doesn't feel secure. Within an hour, the locksmith had replaced every lock, handing me a small envelope with 3 new keys inside. I held them tightly, the metal cool against my palm. For the first time since Robert's death, I felt in control again. When Richard left, he paused at the door. "You did the right thing tonight. Don't doubt that." "Thank you," I said. "For everything." He smiled. "I think Robert would be proud." After the officers and Richard drove away, I was alone in the quiet. The house was a mess, empty bottles on the counter, stains on the rug, music still paused on a half-finished song. But it was mine again. I walked through each room, turning off lights, closing windows, picking up the pieces Derek and his friends had left behind. Every click of a switch sounded like closure. In the living room, I stopped by the photograph of Robert and me taken the year we bought the house. He had his arm around me, the ocean in the background, both of us smiling as if the world belonged to us. "I did it," I whispered. "Just like you told me to." The clock ticked softly in the background. Outside, the waves continued their endless rhythm, washing away everything that didn't matter anymore. By the time I sat down on the sofa, the exhaustion hit, but it wasn't the kind that breaks you. It was the calm that comes when the storm is finally over. That night, for the first time in months, I slept soundly, no nightmares, no guilt, no fear. Just peace. When the sun rose the next morning, light poured through the windows, touching the walls with a golden warmth. My phone buzzed with missed calls, 17 in total. 12 from Derek, 5 from Rachel. I ignored his. But when I listened to Rachel's messages, her voice was different. The first ones were full of tears. She said she was leaving him, that she'd filed for separation, that she couldn't forgive herself for what she'd allowed. The last message was steady. "Mom, I've spoken to Richard. I'm going to testify against him. About the money, about everything. I can't undo what I did, but I can make it right. I love you." I sat there for a long moment, holding the phone, tears forming again, but these were different. They weren't from pain. They were from something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The days that followed felt quieter than I'd imagined. Not empty, just calm. For the first time in a long while, I woke up without dread. I made coffee, opened the balcony doors, and watched the horizon turn from gray to gold as the sun climbed above the water. The sound of the waves was steady and forgiving. Derek didn't return, but his damage lingered. The police report, the legal filings, the broken trust between mother and daughter, it all needed time to settle. Richard called me that Monday morning. He sounded focused, confident. "We filed the civil suit," he said. "And I've spoken with a few colleagues. Derek's going to face more than a lawsuit, his business records are already being reviewed. There's a good chance he'll lose his real estate license." For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. I wasn't happy, exactly. What I felt was closure. Rachel called later that afternoon. Her voice was steady, but I could hear how exhausted she was. "Mom, I left him," she said. "I packed my things, filed for divorce, and I'm staying with a friend. I've spoken to Richard too. I'm ready to testify." There was a pause between us, filled with all the things that had been left unsaid for months. "I'm proud of you," I said softly. She started crying. "I don't deserve that. I let him treat you terribly. I should have stopped it." "We can't change what's already done," I said. "We can only decide what comes next." She took a shaky breath. "I want to fix this. I'll do whatever it takes." "Then start by forgiving yourself," I told her. "The rest will follow." We talked for hours that day. She told me about Derek's temper, how it had worsened after Robert died. How he resented that my husband had always been respected, a man whose work spoke louder than any ego. Derek couldn't stand living in the shadow of someone who earned admiration through integrity. It all made sense now. Derek's control, his cruelty, his need to dominate, it came from fear. He'd tried to compensate by taking what wasn't his. As the weeks passed, the truth caught up with him. Richard kept me informed. The civil suit revealed that Derek had been using Rachel's money to cover his own debts. He'd even taken out a business loan under false pretenses, claiming the beach house as a managed asset. The state opened an investigation. His partners abandoned him. His own family stopped returning his calls. Rachel testified against him with courage I hadn't seen in years. When she finished, she called me again. "It's over," she said. "He's lost everything." I thanked her. Not for what she'd done to punish him, but for finding her strength again. By the end of summer, the noise around the case had faded. The papers were signed, the locks were secure, and life began to move forward. I spent most days at the beach house, caring for the garden Robert loved, writing letters I'd never send, and learning how to live without fear of being dismissed. One evening, I found an old box tucked away in the closet. Inside were photographs from the early years of our marriage. There was one of Robert standing on the very deck where I was sitting now, smiling into the wind, his arm outstretched as if inviting me to join him. I placed that photo on the table beside my chair. That night, I sat there with my tea and whispered, "You were right, Robert. You always made sure I'd be protected. I just had to remember who I was." The stars came out, bright and endless above the water. For a long time, I simply listened to the sound of the ocean. It wasn't the house that mattered, not really, it was what it represented. Love built it, respect maintained it, and courage had finally reclaimed it. A few weeks later, Rachel came to visit. She stood in the doorway, hesitant at first. I didn't say a word, I just opened my arms, and she ran into them. We stayed that way for a long while, neither speaking. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were red but clear. "I'm sorry," she said again. "I know," I answered. "Let's not live in apologies anymore." We spent the evening talking about lighter things, her work, the kids, the little steps she was taking to rebuild her life. There were still moments of awkwardness, but there was also laughter. And that was enough for me. After she left, I sat alone for a while and thought about everything that had happened, the grief, the betrayal, the confrontation, and finally, the peace that followed. People think strength comes from anger, but it doesn't. Real strength is quiet. It's the decision to stand tall after someone tries to make you small. Now, I spend most mornings on the porch with a notebook, writing down memories of Robert, the lessons he taught me, and the moments that shaped who I am today. Sometimes I share them with Rachel's children when they visit. I tell them about their grandfather's patience, his humor, his belief that doing what's right matters more than doing what's easy. Life feels lighter again. As for Derek, his story spread quickly through the business community. The man who once thought he could bully his way through life is now facing the consequences of his own choices. The lawsuit cost him his savings, and the investigation cost him his reputation. He called once, leaving a message I never returned. There's nothing left to say. I've learned that revenge doesn't always come through anger. Sometimes, the sweetest justice is peace, the kind that comes when the truth stands on its own. Now, when I walk through the house, I no longer feel haunted by the memories of that night. I feel gratitude, for the lessons, the strength, and the chance to begin again. The ocean is calm tonight. I step outside with my cup of coffee, the scent of salt in the air, and look toward the horizon. "We did it, Robert," I whisper. "I kept my promise." To anyone who hears my story, never let anyone make you feel unworthy of what you've worked for. Stand firm, even when your voice shakes. Family should lift you, not break you. So if you've ever been made to feel small in your own life, remember this: you are stronger than they think. And if you agree, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more stories, and tell me in the comments, have you ever had to reclaim your own peace? Because sometimes, peace is the most powerful revenge of all.